Jeremy to now. Streaming to you recorded from Seattle, Washington. Here we go.
I grew up in an evangelical home. Until I was 29, I was involved in the church in a variety of capacities, including leadership, service, and organizational development. I didn't leave the church because of some singular trauma, but because I came to realize that the religious box we were putting ourselves in so dramatically limited our ability to relate with the world around us that it was harming ourselves and others. There were many positive aspects to the church, such as a strong sense of community and a group of people who were genuinely cared for one another, which was clearly evident in small group activities. When I left, I knew I was abandoning the Judeo-Christian doctrine, but not faith entirely. I exchanged a community of rigid dogma with the rigorous study and reflection on religious texts and spiritual practices from around the world. I compare this period to my life to the story of the Hebrew people wandering in the desert for 40 years, recounted in the book of Numbers. There were lessons to be learned through loneliness and communal silence. Wandering was not a failure of faith, but a transformation of it. As systems theorist Jeremy Lent suggests, moments of civilizational and personal unmooring are often invitations to move from mechanistic certainty towards relational meaning. In this sense, my leaving was less of an exit than an initiation, a dismantling of an inherited cosmology to encounter something more spacious, more profound. I did feel alone, though. I still feel alone because nothing can replace authentic community, which can occur in any human dynamic where a small group of people choose to care for one another genuinely. I've come to realize that worrying over what another person believes about the world, how it works, and whether it's right or wrong is pointless. No one thinks the same thing, and no one really holds the big T truths in their hands. We all believe some version of a little T truth that we've gleaned for ourselves and attached to a tribe or a collective in the vain hope that we're somehow stronger in numbers. The reality is we become weaker through the false external sense of dogmatic community and connection. This fragmentation, which we call politics or movements or organizations, mirrors what physicist David Bohm describes as the illusion of separateness created by thought itself, in which belief systems masquerades as reality rather than a provisational map. When beliefs harden into identity, it forecloses dialogue. And when dialogue collapses, coherence follows. Agreement becomes the idol, not understanding, and we build walls upon the sandy certainty we find in group identity. The future serves as one of the vertical beams in the framework I use to hold the lenses through which I view the world. The top of the frame, the horizontal truss bridging one side to the other side of the frame, is prophecy, gathered and affirmed from texts and codices spanning tens of thousands of years of human history. How incredibly tantalizing it is to have a narrative fragment that spans millennia and illuminates the lenses through which I view the world. Prophecy is so tempting because it explains the world as we see it unfold. Prophecy takes vespers of future potentials and turns them into self-manifesting little T truths. Unfortunately, we build worlds around the meanings we each co-create. So, Prophecy in community might be its most corrupt form, a collective pillar upon which bodies of faith erect their idols of righteousness. Prophecy takes wandering alone in a desert to understand what we are looking at. Prophecy in community becomes a hopeful certainty that eventually produces seeds of false doctrine. Still, it doesn't mean that the words of our ancestors, meant to speak directly to our future selves, don't hold slivers of big T truths. I've come to realize a secret when trying to hold a future in my hands. I must keep my palms open and let the shimmering possibilities spread their wings and fly away. I must see prophecy for the specter that it is. Speculative futures, whether theological, technological, or cultural, function as what Ruth Levitas would call methodological utopias. Not destinations, but mirrors. One example of this mirroring is observed in how Afrofuturism does not offer escape fantasies so much as imaginative rehearsals for otherwise foreclosed possibilities. These futures do not predict, they provoke. They ask, who are we becoming through the stories we tell about tomorrow? Apocalyptic histories inform careful contemplation of the futures we create. In this new century, many elements of prophecy and futurescaping have converged to shape the reality we experience. All of them are myths with narratives that fuel collective unrest. People's fascination with the second coming, alien disclosure, tic tac radar signals, or the end of the Mayan long count calendar in 2012 are incredibly significant stories we share, shaping our view of the collective future we create. Our robust technological infrastructure to broadcast these stories widely shapes how every individual makes meaning while staring at a screen. Suddenly, we find ourselves in a presence characterized by chaos and disconnection, and we wonder why. Futurist and author Octavia Butler reminds us that the future is not predicted. It is shaped by stories we choose to amplify and the practices we embody. The danger is not myth itself, but myth divorced from community, responsibility, and relational grounding that keep it free to flow. It reminds me of the parable of reaping and sowing and how incredibly powerful each of us is in shaping the collective reality we inherit. As long as we continue to believe in an illusion of safety behind a screen and call it community, we will continue to perpetuate and amplify the current trajectory of reality. It is not just social media or smartphones. I must spend 12 to 15 hours a day staring at a screen. Whether it's a laptop, a mobile phone, an iPad, or a television, all of them are filled with curated content specifically designed for me. Emails, advertising, video content, news articles, television shows, movies, Reddit threads. I am fat on more than just excess calories in this present reality. My disembodied engagement reflects what theorists Gabrielle Donnelly and Alfonso Montori describe as the loss of creative tension, where ideas circulate without the friction of relationship, accountability, or care. Without bodies, breath, and presence, imagination collapses into abstraction. Now more than ever, we need each other. We need each other's ideas, challenges, tears, attention, and presence. We need to be able to walk into a room with a small group of people whom we barely know and be asked, how are your kids? What's going on with that thing at work? What does the doctor say about your cancer? We are here for you. For those ignoring the dissonance of the world, woe to you. For those chasing utopias, I am reminded that the term, first coined by Sir Thomas More in his book 1516 of the same name, was a clever Greek pun of two meanings: the good place and no place. There will be no transformative catalyst through the pursuit of consumption or perfection. We could spend endless hours reading about utopias, writing essays on their feasibility, and debating their practicality. We can explore numerous ideas for creating better futures. But if we're not in community while doing so, we're not practicing. Without practice, there is no implementation, growth, or change. Just ideas scattered on paper, waiting for someone to act. Author Riane Eisler argues that equitable societies are not engineered by ideology alone, but cultivated through relational patterns that honor care, partnership, and mutual responsibility. Utopia, then, is not a place we arrive, but a way we learn to be together. I used to think that agreement was the most essential part of building a positive relationship. Marriage showed me otherwise. It's not just about compromise either. New realities must arise. Agreement can move us forward towards many things, but eventually something will challenge it, and the pursuit of accord becomes more important than what we originally agreed to. Compromise is a helpful tool for temporary conflict resolution, but over time, compromises accumulate like debts that can bankrupt the relationship. I've learned that for a relationship to be genuine, I must be willing to let it change me. I'm not saying the other person or people need to change me. I mean, allowing the emerging dynamic between us, what we call relationship, to transform me. I've wasted decades holding on to the illusion that part of me could stay the same. Photo albums and paperbacks stacked on bookshelves tell the story of worn out truths and used up promises that should have been exchanged long ago for new currency. Vanity is a vampire, and certainty is a soulless partner. To hold on to these things is like dancing with myself naked in front of a mirror. There is so much more for me outside the cloistered rooms I framed for myself. Transformation, as scholar Nick Walker notes, is not cognitive assent, but somatic participation. We are changed not by convincing arguments, but by sustained relational practice. If we want to build a better future for ourselves, it truly requires our willingness to invest effort in relationships. We need to treat ideas as ideas, not ultimate truths shaping our reality. Wilkinson and Flowers call this realistic hope, grounded not in certainty, but in shared responsibility and adaptive capacity. If you want to build a better future for ourselves, it truly requires our willingness to invest effort in relationships. That means we need to be open to hearing many versions of ideas and stories surrounding issues we may consider fundamental. From climate change to gun control, abortion to who is president, the rapture to the origins of COVID, we must be willing to listen to the ideas of others without it becoming an affront to our fundamentals. Paradoxically, to be equipped for this, we must develop an inner constitution that is anchored not in identity, because identity is tied to certainty. This is who I am. Certainty creates silos of bias, and opinion rather than rooted mindful resilience and a deep comfort with simply not knowing. The only way to keep our bias in check is to spend time alone, breaking down the foundational stones we carefully and diligently laid. With practice, we can see the consequences of building our world on the agreements of little t truths. Without such self reflection, we lose our ability to observe and acknowledge that each of us is responsible and accountable for co creation. We lean into our sense of agreement and cede authority to the arbitrators of power who claim they will do it for us. No billionaire, global leader, or AI overlord will ever provide the answers to the problems we seek and face. There will never be a political solution, nor a technological utopia, nor some religious fulfillment to the meta crisis. It is beyond all of their ability to perceive and outside their self interest to address. They hold power because of the authority we give them, and we provide them with that power because we have shaped the world by our fears and desire to ensure a sense of certainty for outcomes and security. That is what is called a cycle of Ophiuchus, or the snake eating its own tail. This is a holographic and fractal dynamic at work. In a process of X-folding, the individual pursuit of meaning making scales up towards the collective world we build. The condition of the individual, therefore, determines the outcome of the world that emerges. In a process of infolding, the frequency with which our collective world building resonates informs and conditions the individual. If the individual is not grounded in a foundation deeper than its own perspectives and manifestations, a dissonant hermeneutic loop is created, like a hot mic laid next to a speaker. Boehm's implicate order helps illuminate this. The individual and the collective are not separate domains, but different expressions of the same unfolding field. Change does not scale up or down. It resonates through. That is why people seek gods and spiritual pursuits. They're looking for a deeper connection to more themselves too. I don't mean this from a religious standpoint, but from the inherent triadic makeup of what we are. We have a spiritual nature that needs tending. Humans are most certainly physical beings who inhabit bodies that interpret and decode the perceived reality around them. That body houses a cognitive being equipped with the tools to decipher, analyze, and act. But there is a third axis that completes the nested coordinates of the human experience: consciousness. Emerging research across physics, indigenous epistemologies, and consciousness studies increasingly suggests that consciousness is not a byproduct of matter nor the brain, but a participatory field through which matter organizes. In this view, meaning is not imposed by but emerges through the dynamic of relationship. This growing body of research demonstrates that consciousness is a resonance that extends across all scales and levels of frequency. This resonance manifests the universal reality in which our tiny human existence is embedded. According to this perspective, brains are not the creators of consciousness, but rather act as transmitters and receivers. Without the discipline of silence, to listen to the silent self within, the domains of our dominant cognitive and biological selves, which tether our quiet consciousness to this reality, construct narratives that trap us in a dissonant hermeneutic loop. Our materialist paradigms leans into the ungrounded mind-body feedback loop and interprets our experience as an individualized, solitary journey through the vastness of a disconnected universe. Imagine embedded in the limitlessness of space time, a self exiled within a mind bodied materialist construct. A lonely, egoic creature emerges, just unaware enough to fabricate an illusionary feedback loop of disconnection to mask its own fear and vulnerability. I do not believe we are the pinnacle of all creation, but rather an inherent algorithm blindly caught on a path of endless growth and unconsciousness. Collectively, we have always used the paradigm of our current model to shape our understanding of a spiritual reality. During the Industrial Revolution, the human body was viewed as a machine. Through that lens, we dehumanized ourselves to the point of enslavement, initially with chains and later with time cards. At the dawn of the 20th century, the electrified world began to reveal the connections between the electrified body and the paranormal. Today, we discuss living in a simulation of reality, as if we're characters in a video game. Perhaps our constructs aren't that far from the truth. Ones and zeros can form the simplest lines of code, creating basic algorithms. Develop that code, and it can evolve into a complicated system capable of performing incredible calculations. Continue building it, and you might begin to tap into a complex system that can interact with its users. What we hope to achieve with quantum computing and eventually with AI is to create a complex adaptive system, something that currently only exists in nature. Incredibly, all these aspects of our physical bodies and the entire scope of the cosmic universe around us indeed are encoded. Just like the ones and zeros of our computer age, nature also writes in code. Nature's cipher isn't a linear construct of binary numbers. Instead, it is written in recursive, spiraling sequences that early alchemists and mathematicians called the golden ratio. Every aspect of the universe we observe and inhabit is built on this algorithmic ratio that expands and contracts, triggering a spiral of matrices that form atoms, cells, molecules, planets, solar systems, galaxies, and cosmic structures. The hollow fractal scaling of a geometric reality. In contrast, if we were to plot the geometry of the human world, cityscapes, oil fields, warfare, corporate profits, election cycles, and the rise and fall of empires, we would see very different algorithms at play. Humanity builds and destroys at obtuse ratios to the geometry of the natural system in which we are but a grain of sand within. We construct our false gods from this errant mathematics and build religions like collective altars with which we insist everyone kneel before. If humans are genuinely a trinity of beings, animated by the algorithmic complexity of the universe, does it not make sense to root ourselves in something greater than our own manifestations? We would have to replace our desire for knowing and certainty with a willingness to live in the mystery. Inquiry would have to become our greatest pursuit, for answers would only lead us into temptation. The development of the self would have to become a path unmoored from the recursive cycle of self-identity. To chart a new course, we would unlearn the clever tools, the agreed upon maps, and the drive towards predictable outcomes. We would have to relearn to read the stars and to trust the emergence And only then would we find ourselves once again afloat on the currents of conscious awareness. Jeremy Tennell is a student at CIIS in the PhD program for Transformative Studies, an author, facilitator, and consultant with Co3 Consulting. Jeremy writes and presents on whole systems design, personal and organizational resilience, and provides paradigm amendment coaching. Together with his partner, Dr. Jerry Balarosa Tennell, they lead teams and organizations in professional development through programs like Healing the Colonized Mind, Whole Systems Leadership, and Holofractal Systems Theory. Jerry is the principal of Co3 Consulting and the author of the award-winning children's book, Let's Live Aloha. Together, they host the Plowline podcast and the Evolution of Aloha podcast. For more information, check out Linktree/Co3 Consulting or co3consulting.net, co3consulting.net. This has been a Plowline production. Thank you for joining.